Okay, so I needed some water. So here's 1B of tonight. We're starting on chapter 3, which is page 25. Elena slumped down into the rocking chair in her bedroom and took a deep breath. The ball was rolling now, and there was no way to stop it. She fought back to the time when she and Pax were kids. She chased him on the playground. He'd stolen a ribbon from her hair one day and refused to give it back, so she'd taken his pencil that afternoon in English. It was still in her memory box where she kept her prized things, like they had a rock they both found on a science trip in the 6th grade when he let her have it, and she thought he liked her. She checked the time and realized she needed to get a shower and figure out what she was going to wear, so a long sigh, she pushed out of the chair. She opened the memory box, took the pencil and rock, and smiled at the vision of Pax as a young kid when his voice hadn't even changed yet. Maybe things would be different, but maybe things would have been different if both of them hadn't been so damn stubborn after that incident behind the barn when they were 13. She snuck back there to get away from all the people who were still hanging around the fall ranch sale and dinner. Paxton had appeared out of nowhere and sat down beside her, and out of nowhere he kissed her. She drew back her fist and opened it and made contact and slapped the fire out of his cheek. She could still see him jumping to his feet and grabbing his face. His voice had cracked when he said, "Why'd you do that? I thought you liked me." "Not like that," she said, "and don't you never try something like that again, or next time I'll hit you harder." He crossed his arms over his chest and glared at her. "Don't worry, I wouldn't kiss you again if you were the only girl on earth." Then he stormed off into the dark, and they both run from emotions of that first kiss all these years. "He didn't have to go and kiss another girl the very next day at school," she muttered. "I don't know if he really liked me, or if he wanted to start kissing and I was available." A shiver ran down Elena's back when she thought of how Pax's touch had still affected her like the first time they kissed, leaving her a little breathless and speeding up her pulse. She stared at her reflection in the mirror. "Maybe this month will get him out of my system. God knows I need to if I'm ever going to move forward with a real relationship." She hated lying to her father, but in the last few hours the sadness had left his eyes, and they talked about nothing but the wedding. If he passed away before the wedding, she and Paxton would simply break up. If not, then they'd get an annulment or a divorce. Either scenario would bring on the gossip mongers like ants to an open sugar bowl. She could handle all that if her daddy could die a happy man. Just thinking that those last few words caused a lump in her throat and was difficult to swallow. She shook a finger at her reflection in the mirror and whispered, "You're making your daddy's wish come true. It doesn't matter how much flack you get all over it or how much you might feel. This is for your daddy. And you will pull it off no matter what it takes. No one will ever know that it wasn't as real until the breakup. And then I'll even take the blame for it so Pax's reputation won't be ruined." With new resolve, she turned away from the mirror and went into the bathroom to take a shower and wash her hair. She came out of the bathroom in a towel with her around her hair and wrapped another around her body. She had 35 minutes to get ready. She quickly dried her long blonde, naturally wavy hair and drew up the sides with a pretty silver and turquoise clamp. Then she clamped on a bit of makeup, a tiny bit of eyeshadow, and light lipstick. She opened the closet door and picked out a lovely off-white dress with spaghetti straps, a tight bodice, and a flowing skirt that stopped at her knees. It took her a while to decide between a pair of light brown sandals or cowboy boots that she'd gotten for her birthday last spring, brown with a turquoise inlay of the phoenix that outstretched its wings. She caught her reflection in the mirror and frowned. "Why am I worrying about this anyway? This isn't real. I'm not really engaged." "But you're playing a important part." Her mother's voice was so clear in the back of her head that she whipped around to see if she'd come back to life and was in the room with her. "You and Pax are doing a sweet thing. It'll keep your father from counting the days and worrying about you when he's gone." "Yes, ma'am," she said aloud and smiled. That was page 26, 27. We're going over to 29. She slipped the phone back into her purse, opened the door, and stood face to face with Pax. He filled out the Wranglers just right, and his western shirt stretched across his broad chest like it had been tailor-made for his body. She inhaled deeply and let it out slow, and she stepped out onto the porch and closed the door behind her. "You clean up very well, Paxton." "So do you, Elena Joy," he offered his arm. Matter of fact, you're downright gorgeous tonight, but then you always are. Kinda nice not having to shorten my stride. He opened the truck door for her. And I double named you because you called me Paxton. You only do that when you're mad at me. It's real nice not to have to watch the length of my steps, too, she replied as she fastened her seatbelt. Most men shy away from a 6-foot giant like me, but lots of guys I've dated were shorter than me. He rounded the front of the vehicle and got behind the wheel. Had already called me. Emily called me. I guess we both dove right into the deep water with this, didn't we? Was it hard to lie to Emily? He started the engine and turned on the air conditioning. Strangely enough, not so much. It was a lot tougher to tell Daddy that we were dating and seriously thinking about getting married. And believe me, she stared him right in the eye, it was sure enough harder to ask you to go along with the idea. We're over the first hurdle, at least, he said. Mama knows, too. She told him about her mother being in her head. Do you ever feel like someone is talking to you, only it's not possible because they passed away? Oh, yeah. He put his truck in gear and drove away from the house. Mostly it's my grandpa, but sometimes Mam fusses at me, and she's even still alive. Your mama is right. This is for Matt, but we've got to keep our heads in the game and like this is real. One misstep and we'll break his heart. I'm glad that he gave us his blessing. And again, this is page 30 and 31. And the ring, she held it up to catch the little white light that left the day. You could have bought a fake one, but this one is so much better. It's ruined for the time when you really get engaged, though, isn't it? Pax turned to the end of the lane, and he stared toward, I'll say it in a minute, and started toward Daisy. Oh, real engagement in my life is a long, long time away, so I might be fine with using that ring again. It's nice to not have something of my mother's, and at least Daddy won't know anything about it when it comes time, she answered. You know, we could go there, she said as they passed the Burger Palace. Oh, honey, that wouldn't be right, Pax said. This is our engagement celebration, real or not, and everyone in Daisy will know where we went by the time we get home. You're right, she conceded. So where are we going? The Silver Dove. Reservations are at 8, he told her. Your dad deserves all the happiness we can give him. Elena laid her hand on Pax's shoulder. You are a good man. Thank you for that. Now, from this moment on, we're engaged, he said. She drew in a long breath and let it out slowly. I'm not going to thank you, but I'm going to say it again. You are an amazing friend and a good man. Did you ever look back and try to figure out when we became friends instead of enemies and competitors, he asked. I think it was that night that you brought me home after prom. God, Pax, I wanted to go with you so bad, but you went stag rather than ask me, she said. I figured if I couldn't take you, and believe me, that time I kissed you and you tried to knock my teeth out, taught me that you didn't want anything to do with me, he said. Anyway, if I couldn't be with you, then I wouldn't ask anyone. But, honey, I couldn't let you go to that after party. Darren Wilson had bragged in the boys' bathroom that he was going too. He hesitated. Darren said that? Yep. He'd been refilling your punch cup and adding vodka to it all evening so you'd be drunk enough to... Another pause. Not tell him, no. So when the prom was over, I talked you into letting me take you home. I guess that's when we started becoming friends, all right. She agreed, but it takes both of us a long time to build up to that now, hasn't it? You got that right. Pax had seen a blooper reel of Friends a few years back, and one of the cast members said, get in character, as she ran her hand down his face. When she did that, she changed into the woman she was playing. As he escorted Elena into the Silver Dove, he told himself the same thing. He liked Elena, and that was a fact. He respected Matt, and that was the absolute truth. We're going to be together a lot in the next few weeks, Elena said. He slipped his arm around her shoulders and leaned to whisper, it won't be difficult. Did you get all your hay in before the rain hit? 30, 31, 32. She looked into his eyes, let a sweet smile play at the corners of her mouth, and answered, yes, I did, and I bet we get another cutting in a month. It's not what people hear, it's what they see that gets their imagination in gear. He kissed the tip of her nose and remembered their first kiss he had stolen out behind the barn a lifetime ago. Who would have ever thought that where they would be today after that fiasco? This way, please. A hostess motioned for them to follow her and showed them to a table in the middle of the room. Vicky will be your waitress, and she'll be with you soon. Pax seated Elena and adjusted her shawl before he sat down. Looks like we got center court, and I see 2 tables of folks from Tooele and from Daisy. She glanced around and waved to those she knew. I thought this was a place for a special occasion. Pax leaned across the table and took both her hands in his. Me too. See that older couple to our left? I bet they're here to celebrate his retirement. You lose that bet. See that big diamond ring on her hand and the way they keep smiling? I think they just got engaged too, she said. They're too old for, he started. Honey, haven't you read that there's more Viagra pills sold than antibiotics these days? A mischievous grin tilted her lips. I bet they think we're talking about how much in love we are. Let's hope so. He gently squeezed her hands. Good evening. Well, hello, Pax Callahan. The waitress batted her eyelashes at him. I heard you moved back, but I haven't been out to the Wild Cowboy in ages. Vicky, meet my fiancée, Elena. Elena, this is Vicky, Pax said. Nice to meet you, Vicky nodded toward Elena and then turned back to Pax. Never thought I'd ever see the day that a woman would lasso you. Pax kept his eyes on Elena and a smile on his face. It took someone who understands me and loves me for what I am, a plain old cowboy. Well, I'm here to take your drink order, and I'm going to leave you with another waitress, Vicky said. I'm already dipping into overtime, and the Silver Dove doesn't like us to do that, so what can I get you? A bottle of your best champagne, Pax answered, and bring us an assortment of appetizers to nibble on so we can study the menu. Coming right up, and congratulations to you both, she winked at Pax. What was that all about? Elena asked. We danced a few times at the Wild Cowboy and flirted a lot, he admitted. Are you going to miss those times the next little while? She asked. Maybe, but then I'm engaged to the prettiest girl in this part of Texas, so I kind of doubt it. We'll be so busy with all the wedding stuff, and that time will go fast. The smile disappeared, and he tilted his head to the side. I'm sorry, you don't want the time to go by lightning fast. You'll want to spend every moment and enjoy every moment with Matt. This whole thing has me so wound up in knots that I'm not sure what I want, she said. The full impact of what is about to happen hasn't even sunk in. I've cried, and Daddy and I talked a little, but not enough. He doesn't seem to want to say much about it. Other than that, he wants his life to be as normal as possible. Looking back now, I realize something's been wrong for a while. He hasn't had much of an appetite, and he's been taking a nap after we come home for a noon break. Maybe if I'd been less involved with the ranch, I would have made him go to the doctor sooner. You can't blame yourself, Pax said, and Matt wouldn't want you to anyway. But I do, she argued. I'm an only child. He raised me as if all by himself after Mama died, and I never thought of him as aging. I guess I figured that he'd live to be 100 or at least 90 like his father did. That's what I thought about my grandpa too, so I understand what you're saying. He was taken from me in a blink of an eye, but he died the way he wanted. He used to tell me that he wanted to drop at the end of a long day right there on the ranch, and that's exactly what happened. Pax locked gazes with her. Your dad has been giving me some time, and he wants me to see that you are settled and happy. We can give him that. Hello, I'm Deanna. Their new waitress had set a silver ice bucket with a bottle of champagne on the table. Shall I pour it for you? Yes, Pax's eyes never left Elena's. Deanna poured the champagne with 2 flutes. I'll be right back with your appetizers. That's 32, 33, 34. Moving to 35, 36, and 37. Pax picked up his glass and held it up. To an amazing engagement and wedding. She touched hers to his, to making wishes come true. They each took a sip. Elena leaned forward and said, I'd really rather have beer, but it's nice to try something a little different every now and then. Me too, Pax said. These bubbles make my nose tickle. Deanna brought out the appetizers and asked if they were ready to order. Elena reached for the grilled shrimp, looked at the menu once more, and said, I'll have the 9-ounce ribeye and a loaded baked potato, fried okra, and sliced tomatoes. Pax handed Deanna his menu. Make 2 of the same, only I want a 12-ounce ribeye. Well, if you're going for the big steak, then change my order to that one too. Elena gave her menu to Deanna. How do you want your steaks cooked? Deanna asked. Medium rare. Pax and Elena both said at the same time, and they laughed. Got it. Deanna hurried in the direction of the kitchen. We've got a lot in common, ranching being the biggest thing, but I was thinking about what it would be like for us if we were really getting married. Pax refilled their glasses and then picked up a fried cheese stick. We both like tomatoes with our okra and our steaks cooked the same way. Think there's more to us than that? We'd make a fine couple. We can talk cows and ranching for hours. We understand each other, and we make a damn good-looking couple. She reached for another shrimp. Yep, he picked up a slice of fried green tomato. Do we have kids in this dream? Their hands brushed, and Pax wondered if she felt the same tingling sensation that he had. She doesn't feel anything but sadness right now, the voice in his head scolded him. He refilled her glass one more time, but not his. That's page 34, 35, and 36. It gets better with each glass, she said. Of course we have children. The ranch house was built for lots of kids, and as you can see, she made a motion that took in her body. I'm built for having kids. You aren't drinking anymore. Does the husband in your dream give up alcohol? I'm designated driver tonight. Matt would shoot me dead on the spot if I drove drinking, he told her. You have all you want. I'll throw you over my shoulder like a big bag of chicken feed and carry you into the house if you pass out. Honey, I'd take more than this to knock me on my butt. I'll admit to being a little tipsy a few times, but only one time did I ever even have a hangover, and that was after prom night, and I never passed out in my life. She popped a tiny stuffed mushroom into her mouth and took a sip of champagne. It's pretty damn good when you blend the two flavors. Here, try one. She leaned across the table and fed him one, then handed him her glass. He nodded in agreement. You're so right. We'll have to have this at our wedding reception. I agree. I think a small wedding and a reception at the church fellowship hall. What's your opinion of that? She asked. Honey, it's your day, so you plan it any way you please. I'll just show up and smile for the pictures, he answered. The smaller the better as far as I'm concerned. I don't know why I didn't tell Daddy that we already eloped to Las Vegas, she sighed. Then we'd have to be married and not engaged. He wouldn't walk you down the aisle. Pax had a sudden image of them really living in the same house together, sleeping in the same bed. He felt his cheeks flush and his blood stir in his throat. Holy smoke, she clamped a hand over her mouth and whispered, What happens if Daddy insists we go on a honeymoon? We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. He laid his hand on hers and squeezed her fingers ever so gently, willing to his mind to think of anything but her on a beach in a bikini. That's page 36 and 37. Here's 38 and 39. Hey, sweet baby. Pax stopped at the high chair to kiss Layla on the cheek. When he reached the kitchen the next morning, he could still hardly believe his brother was now married with a newly walking toddler. As his godmother to Layla, Bridget was taken charge of her when the baby's mother and father had both been killed in an automobile accident in Ireland. Luckily, Pax loved Bridget like a sister, and he adored Layla. Don't you act like nothing happened. Bridget turned away from the stove and punctuated every word with a fork. She might be petite, but dynamite came in small packages, and Bridget was a force to be reckoned with when she walked into a room. Maverick poured 2 mugs of coffee, handed one off to Pax, and then they both sat down at the kitchen table. You and Elena. When did you all stop running from each other? In that moment, Pax understood how hard it had been for Elena to lie to her father. He and Maverick had shared everything since they were little kids. They cried together when their dad died, and again when their grandpa passed away. They moved away to Rock and Bee Ranch right out of high school to work at the couple friends with Tag and Hud Baker. Then when Tag and Hud bought a ranch of their own at the halfway across the state line, they gone with them to help out. After Mam moved into assisted living facility and left Pax and Mav her ranch, he'd come back home, and they worked side by side to restore the place. We had to stop by sometime and see if there was any vibes that we felt for the past 10 years are real, or if they were a flash in the pan, Pax said, trying to skirt around the issue. So why didn't you tell me that y'all were dating? Maverick asked. I thought y'all were still enemies. Pax raised one shoulder in a half shrug. We were what they call frenemies, I guess. That's somewhere between friends and enemies, and then somehow the enemy part kind of went away to the wayside, and a little at a time, and we became friends. We started talking, then it led to more. That much wasn't a lie. After all, he'd come home from Sunset that winter. They had begun to talk about ranching and stuff when they would meet at the feed store or the burger joint. Then they'd start calling each other a couple of times a week to talk about other things. Why didn't you tell me that? Mav asked. Things were going so well between us we didn't want to jinx it, Pax answered. We talked about eloping to Vegas, but Matt always had this dream of walking her down the aisle. That part was true, so he looked at his brother right in the eye and smiled. Be happy for me. Happy for you? Maverick raised his voice. You don't even say the word marriage out loud. You've been running from Elena since y'all were kids. Now you tell me you proposed to her? Marriage, Pax said with a grin on his face. I said it. All right, Maverick narrowed his eyes. Now you said it. But when you even mentioned settling down, it was always after you were 30. Well, I'm almost 29, Pax shot back at his brother. That's pretty darn close. I think you're rushing things because you think that's what we wanted all. I think you're rushing things because you think what. My eyes are playing tricks on me, and I'm sorry. I think you're rushing things because you think you want what we've all got, Maverick said. Pax shrugged. Maybe so, but maybe it is what it is. I'm going to marry Elena, so get used to it. Will you be my best man? Pax asked. It's going to be a real small wedding with family and very close friends with a little reception in the fellowship hall. Of course, Maverick finally smiled, but why the rush? Is she pregnant or something? No, she's not pregnant, and the rush is that we want to get married. God. He raked his hands through his hair. Geez, with this kind of interrogation, maybe we should have eloped to Vegas like we talked about doing. I don't know her so well, Bridget said, but she seems like the type who'd want a big wedding. She lived in this place all her life and knows everyone. I'd think she'd want the big dress and all the thrills. You got her pegged wrong. She's pretty down to earth once you get to know her. She didn't even want me to buy a ring, so she's sentimental that she wants her to use her mother's wedding rings. Pax pushed back his chair and stood up and refilled the coffee mugs, then helped Bridget bring breakfast to the table. That was page 38, 39, 40. Here's 41 and probably 42. Maverick said a short grace, and Bridget passed the platter of biscuits to him first. So what I've heard from you and Elena, that you have both had this chemistry between you, and you've been running from each other for a while, Bridget said. Since they were big enough to walk, Maverick answered. Why would you do that if you felt something for one another? She handed the bowl of scrambled eggs to Pax. She'll be the sole owner of the Bar C when Matt passes away, Pax explained. Until Ma'am deeded this place over to us, I had nothing to offer her. And besides, once you've been up and running as long as we were, it was kind of hard to stop and admit defeat. And, he paused and decided to tell the truth. It all started when we were 13. He went on to tell them the story of their first kiss. I decided right then and there I wasn't going to give her the time of day. I liked her and thought she liked me, but I was wrong, and the rejection right along with the slap in the face sure enough smarted, and I wasn't going to be rejected again. What was the exact day you decided to let her catch you? Bridget asked. We both showed up at the assisted living center to visit Ma'am, and wound up going for a burger. We figured out later Ma'am had asked us both to come at the same time, with no doubt about it. She was playing matchmaker. Then the very next day, Saturday, we were both at the Wild Cowboy. We were dancing with the other people, and her partner tapped me on the shoulder so I could step back, and there she was, looking kind of hurt. So I opened up my arms, and she walked into them. From that moment on, he kept the stories as close to the truth as possible. 41, 42, 40, 41, and 42, 43. Kind of fell in love, Bridget sighed. That's right. He made a mental note to call Elena later and tell her that he told that much of their story. And when did you actually propose? Maverick finished biscuits and eggs and put a stack of 3 pancakes on his plate. Yesterday afternoon out in the barn, Pax answered. She came over to see me right after you left. It wasn't nearly as romantic as I planned, but I did take her out to the Silver Dove for supper last night to make up for it. It doesn't have to be romantic. Bridget gave Lala a small bite of egg while she ate. You know while in your heart when you love a person enough to ask them to marry you. That's the way I figured it. At least he didn't have to tell Elena how it had happened. Then what did you say? Bridget asked. I said, Elena Joy Cowrie, would you marry me? He was damn sure glad that he gotten down on one knee and done it upright. With no ring? Maverick asked. We talked about eloping and having matching bands. Besides, I knew she loved her mother's ring. This was a fine breakfast, Bridget. Where are you going to live after the wedding? Bridget asked. Over at her place. He hoped Elena wasn't having to answer this many questions, but don't worry, I'll be over here every morning. This is our ranch. I'll be here to help you take care of it like I always done. I just won't sleep here. I guess your wild days are over. Maverick snapped his finger. That quick. So were yours, Bridget reminded him. Yes, but, Maverick started. There were no buts when it comes to love, Bridget told him. Pax chuckled as he got up, took his plate to the sink, and rinsed it. I can only hope that Elena and I have as good a relationship as y'all got. He hurried out the back door before either of them could ask another question, went to his truck, and drove out to the barn where Maverick would be working on a tractor that morning. As soon as he was inside, he fished his phone from his hip pocket and called Elena. Okay. Hi, Pax. Elena was already in her truck and headed out to the barn to tell the hired hands where she wanted them to work that morning. I hope you survived the interrogation at your ranch this morning, she said. She smiled at the sound of his voice. Wait a minute. I skipped a little part. I kept everything as close to the truth as possible, he said. He told her that what he had told his brother and Bridget. She smiled at the sound of his voice, and at that memory of the night when they danced in his arms, she felt as if she belonged there and wished that song would never end. Got it, she said. Daddy wasn't so interested in the particulars about what we decided that we were in love. He's more wound up about the wedding. He's called a wedding planner. We're supposed to meet with her tomorrow evening, and he says that he doesn't think the church will hold all our close friends. So he does want to have the wedding here at the ranch. You okay with that? She'd come close to fainting that morning when he told her that her plan for a small wedding idea wasn't going to work, and that they were going to invite everyone they'd ever known. 42, 43, here's 44 and 45. I don't even know what a wedding planner is, and whatever makes Matt happy is fine with me, Pax said. So what are you doing today? I'm helping Daddy measure our sale barn, and then we're going to make out a wedding list so that the planner can get the invitations sent. That means you need to get your guest list done by tomorrow evening. Some of our people will be the same, but Daddy says the planner will get it all sorted out. I'm sure she will. How are you holding up? Pax asked. Trying to keep busy, otherwise I worry too much about Daddy's, she couldn't even say the word, and whether we're doing the right thing. Hang in there, Elena. He seems to be getting a lot of joy out of all this wedding planning. Focus on that. His deep voice soothed her like a hug right over the phone. Thanks, Pax. Can you come over tonight for supper to help with some of the planning? I'll be right there, darling. When Elena got back to the house, her dad was sitting at the dining room table with folders and papers all around him. He looked up from the wide-rimmed reading glasses perched on his nose and smiled. Sit down. I want to go over some books with you, and then we can start talking about the guest list. I don't want to leave anyone out and hurt their feelings. Daddy, I hate paperwork, Elena groaned, and Pax and I really want to keep the wedding a small affair. He patted the chair beside him. Honey, we both hate to do office work, but it has to be done if we want the ranch to be successful. Pick one day a week to take care of it so it all doesn't pile up on you. Your mama loved the organization and books, so she did it before she left us. Her father almost never said when your mama died or even when your mama passed away. It was always when she left us. Elena sat down and kicked off her boots under the table. All right, then, let's get with it. What do I need to learn today? He pushed a whole stack of folders to one side. Let's go over my will first and get that out of the way. I left everything I own to you, of course, but since you're getting married and Pax will be living here, I'm wondering if I should put it both your names until you have a child to inherit the place. It could be a nightmare if, God forbid, something happened to you. Pax wouldn't even be able to pay for a sack of cattle feed. Let's not talk about wills today, Daddy, she sniffled. It makes me too sad, and that can always be changed after the wedding's over and done with. All right, but you need to keep that on the back burner. Matt said as soon as you get back from your honeymoon, we'll revisit this folder. He laid it to the side. Now let's get into finances. You already know the operating cash is for the ranch and how much we put into saving in case we have a bad year down the road, but I've had some personal accounts for a year. I'm meeting with my lawyer tomorrow to sign all these over to you as well. One is for your wedding, so I don't want you to give a thought on how much anything costs. All Elena heard was the word honeymoon. Pax and I thought we'd wait till later to take a trip. I want to spend as much time with you as I possibly can, Daddy. I couldn't bear if she couldn't say the words. Matt wiped a tear from her cheek. Don't cry. We need to talk about this like it's a second honeymoon for me and your mama. We'll be together again, and I'm looking forward to looking at her all I want. After the wedding, I want you kids to have at least a long weekend honeymoon. But that would be time I could be spending with you, Elena argued. It's important for you and Pax to have some time away from the ranches and from the family. It'll make your marriage stronger. Matt patted her hand. So where do you and Pax want to go? What's always been your dream vacation? We never went on anything that didn't have to do with cattlemen's conventions or rodeos. I'm sorry for that. I should have taken you to the beach or the mountains or even New York City, he said. I love going to places we went to, she said. Close your eyes, he said. She did what he asked. Now open them and say the first place that comes into your mind, he asked. Right here on the ranch, she said. Oh, no. You're at least going somewhere for 2 or 3 days, he argued. Maybe Galveston to the beach, then, she agreed, but had no intentions of leaving the ranch till after the wedding. Like Pax said, she'd cross that bridge when it came time, but today she wasn't wasting precious time on a fake honeymoon. 44, 45, 46. Okay. We pick up on page 48. When he arrived, Elena waved from the porch swing and then came to the truck and opened the door for him. We'll put that in the fridge, she said, pointing to the beer. Daddy says he's in charge of dinner and that we're to spend a little time together. She motioned for him to follow her inside, take 2 beers from one of the 6-packs, and put the rest in the refrigerator. She twisted the tops off and handed one to Pax. Let's sit out on the porch. I've always thought these walls have ears and that they report back to Daddy every night at bedtime. Somehow I never been able to keep anything from him. She tucked her free hand behind into Pax and led him through the den, the foyer, and back outside. I used to think that about our house, too, Pax said, but I found out later that it was Mam's hotline with the gossipers and Daisy. He waited for her to sit down beside her and then eased down the porch swing. She scooted over close to him, just in case the drama gossips have spies out, she whispered. This is our first night after the official engagement. If there's 3 feet of space between us, they'll think that we're already fighting. You sure do look pretty tonight, he said, and that's real, not pretend. Orange is a good color on you. Glad you like it, she smiled up at him. Was this the same girl that had slapped him and told him in a loud voice that she'd never touch him again? That's when you were a kid, and you felt awkward about that kiss, too, since it was your first one, Mam scolded him. Pax remembered that night vividly. He watched Elena from the sidelines all evening, and when she'd gone out of the back door, he followed her. The kids at the school had said that she liked him and wanted him to be her boyfriend. He never kissed a girl before, so his heart was doing a double time, and that his hands were clammy. It didn't take too long until his face was burning, not only from a hard slap, but the rejection. I'm planning on using yellow and orange for the wedding. It looks so summery. She took a long drink from the beer. I didn't realize there was going to be so many details. I figured we'd go to the church, get married with a few friends, family watching, then we'd get annulled when she took another drink from the bottle when, well, you know. Pax slipped an arm around her shoulder. Let's concentrate on getting through this day at a time. It doesn't matter to me how big or how small the wedding is, and I'll even take the blame for the breakup when it comes, so as long as your folks don't think that I was unfaithful. The thought of folks thinking that about him would be worse than being rejected by the one girl he'd admired up until that fatal night when they were 13. I'd never do that, Elena said. I think the best scenario is that we rushed into the marriage too quickly because I knew my dad was dying and I wanted to make him happy. It's the truth, so it's believable. And my excuse will be that Matt wanted to walk you down the aisle, so I proposed. It's the truth, even if it said the whole truth and nothing but the truth, he said. One more thing out of the way, Elena agreed. Matt opened the door and said, Food's on the table, so if you 2 lovebirds can quit making eyes at each other, we'll eat now. Pax stood and extended a hand toward Elena. She put hers in his, and together they walked across the porch to Matt and to anyone looking on. They looked like a couple in love. Page 48, 49, 50. We're getting close. I was going to say, I can feel the stopping point. Elena sure looks pretty tonight, doesn't she, Matt? Held the door open for them. Seeing her wear a dress twice in 24 hours might break all records around here. Daddy, Elena scolded, I wear a dress to church almost every Sunday. And you always look gorgeous. Pax leaned over and kissed her on the cheek. He liked that he didn't have to bend down to her and the smell of her hair, but what he liked most was the way she fit against him when they hugged her up tight. Well, thank you both. Now we can eat while the steaks are still hot. Elena went straight to the kitchen table. Look at this. She waved her hand to take away the whole setting. You even got the table set all pretty. Mama would be so proud of you. Matt wiggled his dark eyebrows. It ain't the first rodeo. I used to grill every week for your mama. Friday night she'd dress up and I put a steak dinner on the table. That was our date night when we were first married, when we would try to keep the ranch out of the red. We should do that. Pax held Elena's chair for her. I can grill a mean steak. Matt sat down and put a huge T-bone on his plate and then passed the platter to Elena. We always found it was something and we both looked forward to all week, and it beats the devil out of going out to eat. After all, he lowered his voice and raised his eyebrows, the bedroom is a lot closer when the meal is done. Daddy! Elena's face flushed with crimson blush as she slid a steak onto her plate and handed the platter to Pax. Pax couldn't remember the last time he had blushed, but he had no trouble recognizing the heat traveling from his neck to his face. Oh, come on, Matt teased. Don't tell me that. Elena held up a palm and butted in before he could go any further. I'm already blushing, and you've always said that cowboys don't kiss and tell. Well, neither do cowgirls. Fair enough, Matt chuckled, but while you're both y'all having red faces, and I didn't know Pax was even capable of blushing, if you ever have a daughter, please keep the name Joy in the family. Your great-grandmother was Joy, and your grandmother was Alice Joy, and then your mama's name was Joy Rose. Elena nodded. If we have a daughter, you've got my promise that we'll keep the family name. A daughter of his own. Pax wasn't sure how he felt about that idea, but the marriage wasn't real, so he didn't have to really worry about it. Yet the idea kept nagging at him, and he figured that if he had one like Layla, that would be great. Matt used the present tense when he talked about Joy, and he teased them already about having Boom Boom. That wasn't the quiet soul Matt, Carrie, and Pax had already known. Whatever was in his brain had to be already affecting him. But by golly, he could still grill a mighty fine steak. This is really good, Pax said between bites. Good Kerry beef, Matt said, and before I forget, I'll do a lot of that in the days ahead, according to the doctor. The wedding planner's coming over tomorrow night at 7. She'll need your guest list, Pax, since we're short on time. Yes, sir, I'll bring it with me. Pax made a mental note to call his grandmother the next morning and ask her to help with that. Page 52. Good, and Elena, you need to choose your bridesmaid because Saturday you've got an appointment at that fancy bridal shop in Amarillo to pick out your dresses for you and them. Matt said when I called Trudy to tell her to put us on the charge calendar, she told me about the shop and offered to make an appointment for you. She said that she'd be getting in touch with you to set up a wedding shower. Several ladies have already offered to host us with her. Thank you so much for taking all this on, Pax said. But, Daddy, we really don't need all this fuss, she said. Matt shook his head. No, ma'am. This is going to be the biggest, prettiest wedding the Panhandle has ever seen. I insist on it. The same with your honeymoon. Elena reached under the table and squeezed Pax's knees. The gesture and the fact that Matt had mentioned a honeymoon startled him so bad that he had dropped a bite of his steak fork back onto the plate. I forgot to tell you, Daddy, that wants to give us the honeymoon. Elena locked gazes with him. I picked a beach in Florida, maybe Destin. What do you think? That sounds wonderful. I'd love to spend a few days with Elena on the beach with our toes in the sand, but Matt, I believe the groom takes care of the honeymoon. I'll make all the arrangements for that, and you can take care of the big ranch wedding, Pax told him. Thank you, mouthed Elena when her father wasn't looking. Pax gave a brief nod and went back to eating. That was 50, 51, and 52. Now we're stopping for the evening. So, good night, God bless, wash your hands, keep your social distance, wear your mask, and stay tuned for the second installment tomorrow night. I can't guarantee that it'll be about 50 pages, but I'll try to make it a long one because this is a long book review and it's a great book. So you don't want to miss a moment of this book moment tidbit.